So, what if I told you that there was a good chance that you were biased toward the design of Mario games and you didn't even know it? What if I told you that Mario was the reason you find it hard to enjoy other platformers that weren't directly inspired by or copying his design and core balance? What if I told you that the amazing strides Mario's design has made for the industry have simultaneously stifled future creativity and damned equally as innovative experiences for subconsciously not being Mario enough? Now, of course, to a large degree, the above statements are mostly rhetoric, a metaphor for a bigger problem which will of course apply more to some people than it does to others. But it's something that I think is worth exploring, because I think there's some merit to it. Consumers, designers, and journalists have a huge problem with putting design on a pedestal so high that we're no longer even able to reach it. Although we would like to think otherwise, we often turn our backs on anything different from the established design language, which only changes or expands when something drastically different shakes us from our stupor. Suddenly, where games of a certain design were almost exclusively panned for their choices, later titles that are brave enough to take after them are treated like innovative masterpieces, simply because we're finally ready to accept them. This doesn't always happen though, and often really interesting or fantastic design is thrown by the wayside forever. Of this design that we put on a pedestal, there is none higher than Super Mario Bros. The legacy of this series is universal and unrivaled, the choices made within it permeating and influencing all other games. Don't get me wrong, Mario definitely deserves this kind of praise, and this video is in no way saying that Mario isn't as good as everyone thinks or whatever. The major Mario games are deserving of basically all of the praise they get, as are many of the spin-offs. I love these games, and the only reason I don't talk about them more is honestly because I'm afraid of Nintendo coming down on my channel. Otherwise, I'd talk about Nintendo a ton more often. But in placing so much reverence in these titles, we also shape the viewpoints of consumers, journalists, and even designers in the future. Mario alone could never have changed gaming the way he has. It's how we respond to his games that creates real change. Problem is, we often give too much power to his design choices, and incidentally, let them be used as a way to condemn alternate viewpoints in the present and the future. But I'm being a bit cryptic right now, aren't I? What do I mean by all of this? Well, let's unpack the problem. To begin, we can essentially break Mario's major influence down into two sections, his 2D influence and his 3D influence. Both sections drastically altered game design, and created a language for playing that became ingrained in most games that came after, even if we're just talking small things like specific pieces of how a UI is presented, win-lose states, etc. 2D Mario cemented rules like playing from left to right. It simplified mechanical design in efficient ways, making the game easy to learn and understand. It spelled things out clearly and tried to make sure to always teach players what each piece of design was and how it worked. These sorts of things weren't necessarily common back then. A lot of games were just as cryptic as I was earlier in this video. 2D Mario focused on making movement alone fun and built around that. Players learned to view obstacles as individuals rather than part of a larger picture. We learned to see power-ups as fleeting, impermanent fixtures in our pursuit of success. Lives were fragile in Mario, and even the best power-ups afforded you 1, maybe 2 hits before death depending on the game. 3D Mario did the same thing for 3D platformers. It revolutionized camera controls. It was also based purely on having a gratifying moveset to build the rest of the game around. It understood the complexities and challenges of creating dozens of stages in 3D, so in a genius move, it instead opted to have less stages but make these stages replayable by filling them with multiple varied and interesting goals. It focused on open, exploratory, collection-oriented goals. Design was open-ended and freeform, with little pushing you in any specific direction or pushing you to move faster than you wanted. Point is, a lot of our design language came from Mario. He changed the landscape of games twice, with the whole world staring wide-eyed in awe. Mario's biggest impact was not on his own legacy. It was on how we as players experienced other games. I wasn't a Nintendo kid. I wasn't a Sega kid. I wasn't a Sony kid. I essentially played everything I could get my hands on. I had a Genesis, I had an SNES, I had a PS1, I had a Game Boy Color, I played the Game Gear a ton, I played the NES a ton, the N64. I held no allegiance and didn't even know console wars existed, honestly, until late into middle school when people started fighting about whether the PS2, GameCube, or Xbox was the best. As such, I got a taste of all of the risks each company took to try and one-up the others. I played Mario 3 just as much as I played Super Mario World, just as much as I played Sonic, just as much as I played Crash, just as much as I played Spyro, just as much as I played Mario 64, just as much as I played Mega Man X, and on and on and on. So while I unknowingly but definitely felt Mario's influence in many of the games I played, I also played a lot of games that were intentionally trying to do something different. So it genuinely does bother me to see so many people who primarily or even exclusively played Mario and other games clearly based on Mario's design when they were younger, jumping to many of these other games and complaining that they're poorly designed. This is something that I talked about a bit in my old Sonic editorial, Gotta Go Fast? But I didn't really get personal about why it bothered me. It bothers me because it feels like nobody is trying to teach these people how to transition to these other games. And because of that, to put it bluntly, they're just playing these games incorrectly, and blaming the games for it a lot of the time. A Nintendo kid tries the Crash games as an adult today. Well, they started with Crash 1 because nobody told them otherwise, and then they complain about a lot of the issues that were fixed or changed in later games. Whether one hates Crash 1 or loves Crash 1, we can all pretty much agree it's not the best place to start. This same person plays Sonic. You have to painfully watch as they fail to utilize any of Sonic's core features, and then complain when they smack headfirst into every enemy and obstacle along the way to a swift game over. They either try to force speed like that, or they inch along taking each obstacle on individually, and then complain that speed in Sonic is impossible. You can see them trying to use their Mario knowledge to help them in these games, as they would most other platformers, and it just doesn't work. Because these games aren't trying to be Mario. They see the differences as flaws rather than alternate styles of design. Crash's camera is garbage because they're not used to being unable to control it, and never play 3D platformers with such a strong focus on linear platforming. They say Sonic's level design is questionable because they try to play it like a Mario level that's sped up a whole bunch. They chase and attempt to destroy every single enemy, they never try to protect themselves, they don't pay attention to ring placement or anything else that would denote what obstacles are ahead of them. They don't use the spin dash effectively, they pretty much ignore everything but left, right, and jump. Of course, Mario itself isn't that enormous of a series as far as his main titles go. You've effectively got 5 games up through Mario 64. 4 if you don't include Mario 2 since it's really just a rebranded Doki Doki Panic and it's so different. Or 5 if you include the Lost levels instead, whatever. The point is that there aren't that many Mario games during his most influential period. So how can this be the problem? Wouldn't logic dictate that his influence could only reach so far in the minds of players? It would, if his influence didn't have such a big impact on every other game. If you reflect on just how many games there are that followed in Mario's footsteps, you begin to see how strong his hold is. The more widespread his design became in other games, the more universally understood it became, the more inseparable it became from our perception of good design. Even insanely distilled or different games today like Super Meat Boy or Cluster Truck very clearly take something from Mario's design in ways that lead players to feeling inherently comfortable to some degree when they play these games. Everything else that has a fundamental core difference that makes them feel like a new experience often gets pushed aside as poor design. There was one little comment Aaron Hansen made in his Mega Man X sequelitis that was supposed to be nothing but a passive filler joke, but for years and years has always stuck out to me as ironically true.
See, what confuses me though is that I shot a green thingy on the title screen, but I only shot lemons when I hit the button, and no other button shoots the green thingy, so how do I shoot the green thingy? Well, for the sake of pacing in the video, and for the fact that I'm gonna blow your fucking mind with this shit, let's assume that I'm not willing to experiment any further than what I've done, and I'm a stubborn dick, and I just want to move on. So let's move on!
That clip sounds insane, right? Which is the way the joke is intended to be taken. Who would actively choose to ignore mechanics at their disposal and not experiment to learn a game better, right? But it happens all the time. I do it all the time when playing games casually. It took me over a decade to realize how deep Kingdom Hearts 2's mechanics could be on the harder difficulties, because when I got a new magic or summon, I used it once, and if I didn't see an immediate tangible benefit, I threw it out. And don't even get me started on Final Fantasy. That's why with my reviews, I've always tried so hard to play a game in all sorts of ways along the way. I want to see how far the mechanics can be pushed, see if I can break the game, but I also want to see if maybe any troubles I'm having are my own fault, if maybe the game is just coming from a different perspective and I'm refusing to listen. As much as I love extra credits, extra play, and the great work that Daniel Floyd does on both, watching him play Sonic on extra play is so painful. Fun, but painful. True, since he's really new to Sonic, watching him has also enlightened me to many of the issues Sonic games have that I never noticed, for sure. And it's not like he's mean to the games. He definitely tries to respect the work that was poured into them. But so many times I've seen him fail spectacularly because he's ignoring ideas or mechanics that were presented to him already. Ideas and mechanics that he's free to use in any way he sees fit. Ironically, he kind of does the same thing that Aaron does when playing Sonic games on Game Grumps. Well, Aaron does this to a lot of games, really. They try as hard as they can to play the game in the way their minds are predisposed to want to play the title, rather than the way the game is asking them to play. This conflict doesn't always happen with games that are different from Mario, mind you, whether we're talking Aaron, Dan, or anyone else, but it's all dependent on luck. How smoothly can players transition between Mario-style play and this new style of play? Some games, like Sonic, require an entirely different mindset, whereas something like Sly requires almost nothing more than understanding how to slow down and press circle to attach to certain objects. But the way platforming is perceived is still essentially the same in Sly as it is in Mario, where it should be completely different in Sonic. But nobody is perceiving it that way. I'm not criticizing Dan, Aaron, or anyone else for attempting to force the game to play based on their expectations, mind you. If I wanted to do that, this would instead be a video about do's and don'ts for making a quality Let's Play. I more want to highlight the fact that these Let's Plays are the perfect field tests for my point. Just watch a couple of episodes of Aaron playing a Sonic game, or Dead Rising, or something like that. Or watch Dan play a Sonic game for a few episodes. If you're familiar with the games, you'll quickly note how the tutorials the game offers, and their own previous understanding of how the series should work, are repeatedly let down by their lack of willingness to experiment. Contrast with them playing a Souls game, games they're both really into playing, really interested in inherently, where their expectations for difficulty and gameplay have been tempered, where Dan definitely and probably Aaron most definitely got help transitioning into the games, and it's a series they're willing to put the work in to push further and learn more. Notice how differently they play Souls, and how much more effort they put into succeeding at these games. I think this is down to their expectations with each game. Not only the surface level expectations, of course they expect Sonic to be bad, and they expect Souls to be a fair challenge. So they're willing to fall into those roles extremely easily, blaming Sonic for their mistakes in his games, and blaming themselves when they die in Souls. But more so, I think with Sonic in particular, the way Mario has influenced their understanding of games has given them a set of expectations that they try to force on the series. And when that doesn't work, they're so quick to give up. It's like, you do know that the spin dash speeds you up, so why do you not think to use it to get the height you need to clear an obstacle? Or you know that Sonic can roll into a ball to keep himself safe when running or jumping. So why do you never think to roll when you're going through a series of crazy loops and downhill sections? Is it really the game's fault that you're not utilizing these mechanics and instead fall to your death or get smacked by every enemy? You have the tools, you know what the tools do, and yet you choose to ignore them. Again, I'm not making this video and singling these two out to make fun of them. I wouldn't support their work by watching it regularly if I was planning on burning bridges that haven't even been built yet. They're just easy examples in my own life to point to in order to illustrate what I'm getting at. My goal is also not to say that these games that try to do something different from Mario are perfect, or that many of the complaints they receive aren't warranted. I just find it so frustrating to hear so many people these days saying things like, 2D Sonic was never that good, or 3D Sonic has always had terrible execution across the board, or that Crash's camera makes the games unplayable, or whatever, and then see these same people, frankly, play these games rather poorly. We're throwing out entirely good design decisions because of this. It's a whole baby with the bathwater sort of thing. While get good can be used as a derogatory term to trash people, it also has some value. So why do we expect people to get good when playing something like Dark Souls, but then blame the game when someone sucks at Sonic? In both instances, aren't these people often playing poorly because they're struggling to learn the language of the game for one reason or another? It doesn't always have to be a flaw with the game. Unless something goes horribly wrong, my next video will be about Sonic Mania, which should have come out yesterday if this video is released on time. I'm interested to see the response the game gets, since I'm expecting a lot of this same Sonic has always been garbage rhetoric to be thrown around, along with a lot of half-baked explanations for why this is the case. And unfortunately, I'm also expecting a lot of fanboys who will do nothing but praise the game and say that it couldn't be more perfect, exacerbating the problem. All I can really say is that I myself am going to try and be as fair and honest as possible with it. I'm excited because this will be the first time I've had completely fresh eyes on a classic-style 2D Sonic experience in over 20 years. It's the first time I'll have design-oriented eyes on a new 2D Sonic experience. Sonic 4 doesn't count. And I'm interested to see if maybe I'm completely wrong about these games. Who knows, despite so much research and effort poured into understanding them on my part, maybe they are broken, and the only way they can be good is through trial and error memorization of sloppy mechanics and level design. Maybe the games are bad, and those that find joy in them, like myself, are really just working around the issues without realizing it. I'm keeping an open mind to this idea in order to deliver an honest video about Mania. Time will tell which way the Sonic rolls, I suppose. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you're interested in another one, here's the last one that I uploaded. You can also follow me on Twitter or subscribe by hitting the subscribe button.